Good evening, everybody. I'd like to call this City Council Special Recognitions and Presentations meeting to order on February 25th, 2025 at 5:30. We'll have a moment of silence and in place of the invocation, please. Thank you. Can you stand for the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. She made it.
Oh, thank you very much. I was about to ask if we had a quorum. City Manager? City Manager? Oh, City Clerk, sorry.
This is a city council meeting to hear special recognitions and presentations. Council will not take formal action on the agenda items. All individuals wishing to speak may do so under petitions and requests. No sign-up card is required. Citizens will be given 3 minutes to speak. All sign-up cards and exhibits being submitted to City Council shall be placed in the box on the table.
Thank you, City Clerk. City Manager?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and Council. Our first recognition this evening is item 4A, which is the Employee of the Month for February 2025. And we're pleased to announce that Tammy Weiner is the Employee of the Month. And Terry, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Glad to see you here tonight. I'm very proud to announce that Tammy Weiner is our Employee of the Month for February. Tammy has been with the city nearly 19 years, so she's a longtime loyal employee. She was promoted last March to our budget manager in the finance department. Shortly after that, the next month, our longtime payroll accountant retired. Luckily, Tammy had been learning payroll as a backup to that position. So now Tammy was doing payroll and doing her new job as the budget manager. She wore that hat for nearly a year now. She trained 2 other people to be able to do payroll, one of which was she trained on her former position before she was promoted, and the other she trained to be the payroll person who is currently doing it for us now. So having done 2 positions, almost 3 really, and learning her new job, Tammy was able to successfully gain the city the certification on her tax roll. A lot of people don't know what that is. It's very important. If we don't get our tax roll certified, the city is unable to collect taxes and we're unable to collect our shared revenues. So amidst all of that was going on, training people, that's why I nominated Tammy to be the Employee for February.
The next item is item 4B, which is the Joinerville and Beyond, the African American community of Titusville. A presentation will be given at council's request. Ma'am?
Before we start the presentation, we do have a short video that our media services staff created for this project. We'd like to show that first before Ms. Kim Hinder will give the presentation.
Titusville, Florida, a city where the history is woven into every street, every building, and every story. Some stories have been waiting to be shared. This is Joinerville and Beyond, memorializing and celebrating Titusville's African American history, a project dedicated to uncovering, preserving, and honoring a part of Titusville's shared heritage. With a grant from the state of Florida's Division of Historical Resources, the City of Titusville and the Historic Preservation Board collaborated with StanTech of Orlando to document the city's African American heritage.
Beginning around the 1880s, African American settlers made their way to Titusville They made significant strides in establishing their homes, local community, churches, schools, and businesses. Andrew Jackson Gibson is noted as the first African-American resident of Titusville. He was the first businessman of Titusville. He owned his own barbershop, restaurant, and started a school for his kids, which expanded throughout the rest of the community. And that many others would soon follow, and they would come various ways, either through the railroad or through steamboats, or they may have just walked, and they would settle just off of what we now know as South Street and South Palm Avenue. And basically they were residing in tents. And later they were able to be housed. There was a gentleman by the name of George Robbins. So he built a home, housing for the workers that would come down to work on the railroad system. So that was actually the genesis of the beginning of the community. And of course, they would bring their families along with them, and they would work from their dwellings to help with the railroad system. Businesses would start in their homes, and eventually over time they would migrate to South Street, where they built up what we knew then as the Black Business District right there on South Street. And that's the location of the Brevard County Courthouse on South Street. That used to be the location of the Black Business District. The idea of the Joinerville project is to just recognize the individuals, the struggles of the community, highlight those accomplishments, and to preserve our history. And I'm grateful that the city of Titusville recognized that our Black community was underrepresented as part of the city's history preservation efforts. So we want to correct that and give more recognition and notice to the Black community, and highlight the struggles, the accomplishments, and the contribution to the city of Titusville through preserving our history.
Through research, field studies, and oral history interviews, StanTech collaborated with the city and community members to document the untold stories of Joinerville, preserving the memories of those who lived, worked, and built a life here. Engaging the community was at the heart of this project. A public workshop held in April of 2024 opened the door for residents to share knowledge of lost landmarks, significant events, and the personal stories that make this history come alive. Many residents brought in photographs, newspaper clippings, and personal memorabilia, offering tangible links to the past. These contributions provided invaluable insights, helping to build a more comprehensive historical record. Every name in an old census record, every faded photograph, every pinpoint on a map adds another layer to the story. The result is a detailed historical record connecting past generations with the present.
Well, I think it's important to recognize the community, to ensure it stays part of the Titusville historical landscape, and that we don't lose sight of marginalized communities in the city of Titusville. And I think it's important to maintain that, to have a place where anyone can go to study about not only the city of Titusville, but their families' contributions and what it all means, and have some idea of when they see a street name, they can recognize that name, they can reflect on the person's family, and the contributions they made to the community. And I'd like to see the project, the results of the project get more into the community's mindset, and that would hopefully encourage members of the community to get more involved in discovering more about their history, and to be able to share that with their children and grandchildren and so on, and that to show that there's always hope to overcome adversity.
Looking ahead, efforts to preserve and share Joinerville's history remain essential. Recommendations from StanTech and community input highlight the importance of bringing this history into public spaces. One key proposal is an interpretive sign program designed to create a recognizable and consistent way to highlight historic African American heritage sites, events, and resources. Walking tour brochures and a dedicated website could further document and celebrate this rich history, offering both educational opportunities and a sense of place for this community. Signage and other interpretive materials could integrate photos and historical information along with text or audio clips from oral histories to highlight places that are important to the community. While some of these structures and sites remain, others exist only in memory. Joinerville and Beyond is more than research. It's a commitment to remembrance, recognition, and preservation. Thank you to Stantec, the City of Titusville, the Historic Preservation Board, our community historians, and most importantly, the residents who shared their stories. Joinerville's legacy is alive, and through preservation, it will continue to inspire generations to come.
All right, thank you. My name is Kim Hinder, and I'm a senior historian with Stantec, and I have a presentation that should be loading, hopefully. There we are. So anyway, I'm going to provide some additional information on the Joinerville project, which we completed last fall. So the main goal of this project was to learn about the important places in the history of the African American neighborhood, both those that are demolished and those that still exist, and to provide a comprehensive history and a final report. Understanding that much of the history of the community is unwritten, the first part of the project involved gathering background research and information from a public workshop, which was followed by the collection of oral histories. Sites were then mapped to identify significant properties and historic and current community boundaries. This resulted in the creation of a history of Titusville's African American community and guided recommendations for future preservation efforts. As Mr. Davis mentioned in the video, the first known African American residents, Andrew and Miley Gibson and his brother Edward, settled in Titusville in 1874. Their houses were depicted on the first plat, which was named Joinerville, which was filed in 1879. The Gibsons operated a restaurant and a barber shop and played an instrumental role in the establishment of the first African American school and black churches. The railroad arrived in 1885, bringing new African American workers building the railroad. Many stayed to work the turpentine, fishing, and citrus industries. Black-owned businesses opened along South Street during the 19-teens, creating a commercial district which thrived from the 1920s to the 1960s. During this period, social life continued to revolve around school and the churches. Ministers and teachers were community role models. Teacher Harry Moore became the principal of the Titusville Negro School in 1927. Active in the NAACP, Harry and his wife Harriet Moore led regional efforts for equal rights and were fired by the school board in 1946 for demanding equal pay for black teachers. The couple continued their efforts and were murdered on Christmas Day in 1951. Local African Americans were inspired by the Moores and continued efforts toward desegregation and equal rights. The establishment of Patrick and Cape Canaveral Air Force bases during World War II led to Port Canaveral, NASA, and Kennedy Space Center in the 1950s and 60s. New segregated neighborhoods opened to house the new workers, including Lincoln Park and Gibson Park, in which Pine Hills Elementary and Gibson High School opened in 1957. The growth of the county also prompted the construction of a new courthouse annex, which resulted in the demolition of the Black Business District in the mid-1960s. Some businesses relocated further west and south, but many closed. So with the basic neighborhood history in mind, we started community involvement at a public meeting held in the community in April. At the meeting, we briefly described the project, but for most of the time we divided the 34 attendees into small groups and used maps and aerials to have them help us record the locations of sites and events. We initially focused on the boundaries of the community and then moved on to businesses, churches, and sites that people remembered visiting in their neighborhood. We also noted the important people who played a role in the development of the neighborhood. Subsequent presentations in May and August have invited additional input. Following the community workshop, our next step was to conduct oral history interviews. Recruitment started with conversations with 8 stakeholders provided by the city. Participants were also recruited at the community workshop and a local high school reunion. While the project was scoped for only 8 interviews, 21 people were recruited in just 3 months, revealing significant interest in future oral history initiatives. We conducted 5 individual interviews and 1 group interview with 3 participants. These were conducted virtually and audio recorded, generally lasting 45 minutes. We also reviewed existing oral histories from the Brevard County Oral History Project to supplement data. The project's interview participants included long-term residents, local business owners, civil rights leaders, and community members invested in the preservation of local history. Oral history can be a valuable tool by capturing memories, experiences, and cultural significance associated with physical spaces. For this project, we developed 3 primary objectives. First, to collect data that would guide the development of the historic context and resource mapping, helping to reconstruct both physical structures and their social and historical significance. Second, to gather oral testimonies from individuals invested in preserving community history to inform project recommendations, while also identifying culturally significant resources and appropriate preservation methods. Lastly, the community outreach and interviews serve to engage community stakeholders to help foster relationships and preservation interest with the local municipality, which could guide future collaborative efforts. So we combine the gathered information along with the background research we conducted to create a historic assets map showing historically significant properties, both those still existing and those demolished. So the center of this map shows a portion of the map overlaid on a 1972 aerial. We then had stakeholders review the maps for accuracy. The various dots show businesses, churches, parks, and homes of important people, some of which were lost long ago, and the only way to know that where they are located now is through community memory. So that history is now documented in this report. In addition to the printed maps in the report, we provided all of the GIS information to the city. The final step involved creating preservation recommendations, which were based on a combination of an analysis of oral history interviews and preservation best practices. Reoccurring themes and topics in the interviews identified 3 primary areas of significance: community borders, the Black Business District and Black-owned businesses, and culturally significant sites and resources, which represented a mix of parks, residential neighborhoods, community centers, and other places that have played significant roles in the history and development of the Black community. We recommended 2 types of projects for future oral history. Themed collections focus on specific aspects of community history or experiences to fill gaps in the historical record. For these projects, we recommended 4 primary themes: civil rights, education, occupation, and founding families. Intergenerational or school-based projects were recommended to capture perspectives across different age groups and engage students in collecting and preserving local history. These projects involve interviewing community and family members, particularly older generations, to record their memories, stories, and knowledge about family lineage, traditions, and historical events. This project also included recommendations on conducting and preserving any future oral histories and archives. The project's oral history interviews identified key themes and topics that could fit well into any educational standards for many different grade levels. Topics like founding families and the Kennedy Space Center are directly related to the area and local history. Broader themes like education and civil rights should be presented through the stories of specific individuals and events that help shape the community directly. For example, Henry and Harriet Moore were a reoccurring topic in the interviews, and they remain a strong example of how historic local events and people can shape their community. Incorporating local historic events and people into school curriculums teaches a history that is tied to the places that students live. The things around them, such as historic structures, neighborhoods, and sites, whether still existing or not, can provide engaging sources for students to explore and can give students insights into the past that may not be recorded in their school history books. Based on this, recommendations were made to incorporate preservation projects and local history into the city and county schools. These included projects for students to conduct oral histories, research topics for historic designations or markers, research candidates for street renaming projects, identify existing exhibit topics, write interpretive signage narratives, and participate in public archaeology projects. We were able to digitize historical items and photographs that the community members provided. Some of these were incorporated into the final report and helped shape the project's broader objectives. We provided recommendations to the city on creating and maintaining these and future digital collections, including appropriate storage and management by possibly partnering with local museums or libraries to store and manage archived materials and oral histories. This would ensure equitable access for future generations in a format that can be easily shared and explored by the community, not just future researchers or the municipality. Another option is to create a physical archives in conjunction with a local African American history museum that could relate the local African American experience to the broader public and make the archives more accessible. The remaining Gibson House in the upper right picture could serve as a gateway to the community, provide a tangible example of the way people lived, and a glimpse into the former commercial district that surrounded it. Just as an example, the rest of the pictures here are of a shotgun house that's been preserved and converted into the Preservation Resource Center in Santa Monica, California. It houses displays and interpretive elements and serves as an office for the organization, encouraging tourism and highlighting the importance of the neighborhood. The same could be done here in Titusville. Another project recommendation suggested a variety of ways to designate or provide recognition to historic properties and culturally significant sites. The most effective legal tool available for the protection of historic resources is local designation through Historic Preservation Ordinance, which requires a review of exterior alterations or demolition by the Preservation Board. Although this may not prevent alterations or demolition, this additional review may provide the opportunity for project changes to improve compatibility or for documentation prior to demolition. The resources shown here are some of the properties which we identified as possibly eligible for local designation or some form of recognition, such as acknowledgement of a founder's house. Another example of local recognition, we recommended creating a legacy business program to bring awareness of the historic nature and cultural importance of local businesses. Legacy business programs recognize small businesses that support community identity and stability through their long tenure, like the Lincoln Barber Shop and Lawson Construction Company shown here. The program could provide recognition, marketing, and business help, and grants to longstanding businesses. Recognition of community borders and historical landscapes was a significant theme throughout our outreach. Oral history participants identified 3 1950s-era street markers as significant cultural landscape features in 2 neighborhoods that developed as segregated housing for African Americans. All but 3 of these markers were removed when streets were paved and metal street signs were installed. These neighborhoods are currently experiencing impacts from new housing development and gentrification, and community members were worried that these would be removed. Preserving cultural landscape features like these requires ongoing maintenance and protection, but these structures are important reminders providing a sense of place to the community through a shared history. Another recommendation for community recognition was the installation of street sign toppers, such as shown here in the middle photo. Signs are attached to or above the municipal street signs at designated locations to recognize the significance of a neighborhood. This type of recognition is a reminder of an area's cultural heritage, which is especially relevant in communities facing new development and gentrification. Recommended heritage education included public education programs for both adults and children to be developed through programs between the city, county, and local organizations like libraries or museums. Through these programs, people can learn to value the significance of the historic resources in their community and become responsible stewards for their environment. Interactive methods such as interpretive sign programs or walking tours can highlight historic events and resources. Signage and other interpretive materials can integrate photos and historical information along with text or audio clips from oral histories to highlight places that are important to the community. The photos here are an example of the Newtown Alive project in Sarasota, Florida, that brings together a series of interpretive panels, integrated websites, a mobile app, and offers scheduled guided or self-guided tours. A similar project, the St. Petersburg African American Heritage Trail, incorporates two corridors, both with different themes, in order to tell the stories of the people and places significant to St. Pete's history. Both projects include stops at existing and demolished historic structures. In developing this kind of program, themes and topics should include the entire range of history, incorporating not just early pioneers, but also celebrating local people who might still be alive and their contributions to the community. Through the community engagement and research, we developed potential tours with routes, themes, and topics for Titusville, which could be used to create a multi-platform interpretation program. Educational materials could focus on a variety of topics, including the businesses along South Street, the schools, important people, or typical housing in the neighborhood. The interpretive content should take the opportunity to tell individual stories to connect to people. The community workshop and oral history interviews played a crucial role in reconstructing Titusville's Black business district, which was demolished in the 1960s. But its presence and importance to the community should still be recognized through heritage interpretation. An engaging addition to the streetscape could be to use stumblestone markers embedded in the pavement that, when they're integrated into a broader interpretive plan, these markers bring the past alive along a modern street and tie history to specific locations where the buildings no longer exist. Campbell Park was identified by participants as the preferred location for interpretive materials. Perry Harvey Park in Tampa, which is shown here, is a good example of where a variety of displays incorporating the work of different artists tell the complex story of the Scrub, Tampa's oldest and largest African-American neighborhood, which is now largely demolished. Different methods include gateway sculptures of musicians, a history walk of life tiles, timeline pavers, a bronze statue, murals, and Leaders Row, which consists of earthen walls telling the story of the most influential individuals in the community through images and a Sanborn fire insurance map. Community input is critical in determining the design and content of any future interpretive displays. By bringing together so many types of interpretive media, projects can reach a broader audience and bring greater recognition and exposure to the community's history. The final recommendation involved the pursuit of additional grants to complete a comprehensive survey of the neighborhood, as well as prepare master plans for historic cemeteries. Grants could also fund archaeological surveys, which could build on the history of the neighborhood through the material remains left behind beneath the surface. These efforts could provide an opportunity for public education and engagement with local school groups or community members. Our final report was provided to the city and submitted to the State Historic Preservation Office. Stakeholder and community feedback has been very positive, and I presented our recommendations to the city's preservation board in September, and they have met to discuss options for implementing the recommendations. So I just want to thank the city for allowing us to work on this great project and thank the community for sharing their insights, their history, and their memories with us.
Thank you very much. Vice Mayor Cole?
I just want to say it's such a well put together book, and it was a great presentation. During Black History Month, I have given quite a few presentations, and every time I go to the presentations, I take this book. And I tout the efforts of our Historic Preservation Board in doing these kinds of things to let people know what was in our Black community. And I will continue to do that. I always come back to our city manager and get extra books, so when I go to give the presentations, I can hand them out so people can see them. Thank you so very much, and thank you to the Historic Board for doing that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Cole. Any other comments? Seeing none. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Alrighty. Petitions and requests from the public.
Tony Schiffalo, the historic Norwood House on Tropic Street in the old Joinerville. As a resident member of the target area, I am so pleased and proud of this project that the Historic Preservation Board took on. As a member of your Historic Preservation Board, I am so pleased that so many people out in the world of Titusville are appreciating and wanting to know more about our historic African-American community. As a person who lived most of my adult life in Atlanta, Georgia, I had the opportunity to socialize a lot with the late, great John Lewis. Fortunately for me, I wasn't one of his political people, so anytime I got to see him, I could talk with him about real things. I was able to bring my involvement with the African American community in Atlanta to my home now here in Titusville. And I find that now in this time, during the demise of diversity, equity, and inclusion, that this Joinerville report being released to the city of Titusville at this time is so important. And I hope and pray and will work diligently and dedicatedly to making recognition of the places that were and that still are in this area known not only in Titusville but throughout Brevard County, and perhaps bring some information to the country at large. My first experience with civil rights was right here in the Titusville area when I marched with Hosea Williams in the Poor People's March when they sent men to the moon. I had come over with my relatives to actually watch the launch, but was recruited by some very persuasive people to take part in that. And that was the beginning of my lifelong delving into bringing inclusion. And so I have great hopes and many plans that I've spoken with many of you individually about for the Joinerville. And I would like to see council encourage your Historic Preservation Board to seek the grants that are out there and to pursue the things that we can do to bring recognition to this wonderful area.
Thank you, Tony.
Can I add to it?
All right, Member Nelson.
Tony, I want to say thank you. I didn't get a chance to finish our conversation the other day, but your idea was great of a wall, basically showing the entrance to Joinerville. Love it. It'd be cool because we could get the kids involved. So thank you. And I have to say, Tony is actually going to speak to the Boys and Girls Club kids Thursday. And I think they'll get a kick out of seeing things that were, hearing about some of the people they might know. I think it's great. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Nelson. Who wants to go next?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Lynn Golden. And Sister Tony was talking about Jonesville. And I was talking to my Aunt Evelyn Bell, which is a retired school teacher, 96 years old. She's been collecting pictures for the neighborhood Black historical. Plenty of pictures she's been calling people. And one of her main things that she wanted to do was to build a Black historical building in our neighborhood. At that time, we thought that the city owned all the land behind Blues Grocery, and we were going to try to build that building behind there, but then we realized the city only owned a little sidewalk. And so she is still willing and to give her some of her property to have a historical wall of every Black business that was downtown by the courthouse before the courthouse. All that was Black-owned business. And so we're still looking into that, trying to get grant money or whatever we need to do to build this wall on South Street where I have a business there at 1001 South Street. So we would like for you to consider some of these things through the historical reservation building and committee, that maybe we can do something in our own community. So when people come through Titusville on South Street, they can perhaps stop and say, well, I didn't even know all this was going on. And even with our Black young kids today, they need to know the history. Since they're taking books out of the library, then we still have some people that are still living. I have a 100-year-old aunt, retired school teacher. They have pictures. And the other day, Mrs. Sadie Gibson grandson brought pictures of Harry T. Moore, his grandmother, Miss Bernice Warren, that was a retired school teacher. So they're collecting all these things. We have probably pots, pans, spoons, whatever family members have already kept to let the kids know that we did have something in our community. So I just wanted to bring that up to you tonight, okay?
Thank you, Ms. Lynn.
Okay, all right.
Oh, Member Nelson.
Lynn, I'm sorry, and this might not be a question you can answer. Does the Gibson house still exist? Where is it?
I didn't hear you.
The Gibson house?
It's the house right across from one of the houses across from the courthouse.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that would be a perfect place, wouldn't it? For
Well, we
historical?
had Ben Warren House, but because they told him it was needed to be torn down, we were going to help him renovate that house to have a historical house with his mom, since she was a retired school teacher.
Yeah.
But then it was so costly to keep the house and refurbish. Then they told the city, said, knock it down. So he still has that land over there across from the courthouse that maybe we could do something with him as a Black historical building.
Okay,
Okay?
that'd be cool.
Okay.
Thank you,
Member
Ms. Perry.
Nelson, I just want to make one correction. I don't want to dispute what you're saying, Ms. Golden, but the house that you're referring to, the Warren House, that was the request of the property owner to demolish that. That went through a process where the historic board had to review it with a certificate of appropriateness to see if that was okay to do. So it wasn't on a direction by city council or by the city to demolish
No,
that
it
home.
was under the direction when Ben went with the not the revival, the historical, my understanding.
The property owner did
Yeah,
that.
he's the property owner, yeah.
Right, it was not the city directing
No,
him.
the city,
Okay.
but when he wanted to keep the house, whoever told him it wasn't worth saving his mom's house, so he knocked it down,
Yeah.
and he had to pay all this money.
I just want to be clear to everyone that that was not the city that said that. That was an engineer or whoever that the owner obtained for professional opinion on that, and he determined
Yeah,
to destroy that
Well,
home.
we thought the city would have helped him to save that house through the group there, historical, but they did not. Ben will be here perhaps tonight. He can explain what really happened, okay? All right.
Thank you, Ms. Lynn. Mr. Johnson?
I don't have a shirt on like her, but I was a member of that group for about 20 years. And
Still a member if you come back.
yes, ma'am. Thank you. And so we're a group of people who did the Martin Luther King parade, march for many years. I gave this to you, and it's one for Mr. Broom and Mr. Larice, and that is, has to do with violation. The city of Titusville have made many violations of this ordinance, which I've talked to Mr. Broom about, which if he remembers. And it says this, it says, obstructing waterways shall be unlawful for any person to dam, obstruct, or in any way place anything in the natural drain. And that's a law, a city of Titusville law. So I copied that city law. But what has happened is that the city of Titusville constructed 4 dams in Bloody Mary Ditch, which is a little bit downstream of my day. 4 dams. All of them are illegal. All of them are illegal by city code. City still does nothing about it. By the way, when they were designed, there was no compensatory storage. There was no survey downstream. There was no wetland survey, nothing. It was a taking of property also. But let me go on to the second issue. It's something for you to consider, is that I've sent you an email Saturday, and it has to do with an opportunity for you guys to straighten up some problems, and that is S&J Oaks. If you go to S&J Oaks and go to a street called Mockingbird Lane, and you look at it, Mockingbird Lane, you see a 20-foot wide driveway, and it runs directly into it. It runs right into a fence. Let me say it again. It runs right directly into a fence. That's been approved by the city of Titusville. I passed it by the fire department and police department. Who cares? I care. I'd like you guys to care too. Not only that is you look up in the sky, you see what? Overhead electric. It's not on the survey. It's not on the plat. Guess what? That's illegal. That's illegal. You got to have put a easement there on the plat for that. Didn't do it. It's open and notorious. If you look at the right-hand side over there, you see there's a post about 2 feet off the ground, 4 inches in diameter, black, with a barber pole in it. That was a survey marker by the Forbes property. Well, it so happens that the new surveyor has got a point about 4 feet away. 4 feet away or so. So you measure from that point, and you measure what the surveyor says to be 53-foot diameter, 53-foot wide.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Oh, you sure don't want to hear about this?
I'm sure.
Anybody?
I got to keep it all fair. I appreciate it.
Okay, thank you for letting me share a little bit. Okay, have a nice day.
Yep. Anybody else for petitions and requests during this meeting? Seeing none, I believe we are adjourned for this meeting, and we'll come back at 6:30. Thank you.
And